This is advanced tech for the Sailrite Ultrafeed sewing machines.
Hi, I'm Matt Grant. I'm standing in front of the Ultrafeed LSC1, and what I want to show you today is how to set the foot height and the range of motion between the inner, which is the presser foot, and the outer, which is the walking foot, on an Ultrafeed sewing machine. And what we have here is a machine that we're doing a repair on, and you can see that the foot height is just wrong. This is with the presser foot up, and the outer foot is not only coming too close to the feed dog below, but it also isn't coming nearly far enough forward. So when I drop the foot, I'm getting a huge lift to the outer foot, but the travel is way too far back, and I'm getting very little popping of the center foot. It's just not right. So how do we get it right? All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to really mess it all up. And by that, what I mean is I'm going to loosen the set screw on the center shaft. So you'll notice when I loosen this, I can move and twist and raise and lower the center shaft. You'll see it moving up here. If you've got a tight one, sometimes you have to tap it up top here and then twist it to move it up. Okay, so it's loose. Now I'm going to loosen the outer foot. 2 3mm Allen head screws back here on a device that clamps down to the shaft. Okay, now my outer foot is loose. So now I have absolutely no concept of where anything should be. And now, to make things even more complicated, I'm going to loosen these 2 set screws. 1 and 2. 3mm again. And what these do is they control the fore and aft movement of the walking foot. So everything is loose now. Now, first step to reset, so we've got it all messed up. Now what we want to do is we want to set it. So how do you set it? Well, first thing you want to do is rotate the flywheel until the needle bar is at the very top of its travel. Now you'll know it's at the top of its travel when this arm under here is perfectly parallel with the needle bar. So I'm going to look down from the top, make sure the 2 are in line with one another looking in from this end, and they are, so I know I'm at the very top. When I'm in that position, this actuator here, I often call it the flat T-shaped piece with 3 pivots in it, it should be not perfectly vertical, it should be canted back just a little bit. And this one's probably within range, but we're going to adjust it just so we can get everything set just perfectly. That's controlled right here, and there are 2 set screws here. So I'm going to loosen these. Now what I'm going to do, now notice I can move this. Okay, so I'm going to set that back to about 2 degrees angled aft, again when my needle bar is all the way up. So you set your needle bar all the way up, get that set at about 2 degrees aft, or toward the back of the machine, for those of you that aren't sailors. Okay, now I'm going to tighten up these set screws because we're not going to have to adjust this again, so I want to make sure these are good and tight. And it is not uncommon to really bend Allen wrenches when you're tightening things up on this machine. There's a lot of pressure when you're sewing this heavy material, so you'll notice that I'm cranking them a lot. And if you're not cranking them as much as I'm cranking them, they're going to slip. They tell you not to do that in shop class. Okay, those should be good and tight. All right, so we've got that part set. Now, what, pray tell, do we do with the feet? Well, the first thing is we want to get the fore and aft motion somewhere close to a range that makes sense. And what we're going to do there is we're going to rotate the flywheel until the feed dog gets all the way forward. This is the feed dog under here. So get it all the way forward and stop there. Now we know when the feed dog's all the way forward that the outer foot should be pretty close to its furthest forward position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this slot here, because that's my stop point, and I'm also going to look at the feet, And I usually like to have the toes of my walking foot come further forward than the center foot, no more than about 1/8 of an inch or so, maybe a touch more, I should say. So I'm going to set that so it's very close to that. Notice that leaves me a nice gap here. And now I'm going to snug one of the set screws that controls that. Now notice this thing can move in and out. If you have it out here, nothing's going to happen because you're not engaged. So you got to make sure it's pushed over here and it's actually doing what it's supposed to do. It should be sitting over top of that bolt or that protrusion. And now I'm holding it in place with my right hand. You see that? And I'm going to just make sure that this is pushed over to my left. I don't want it so tight that I create a bind here, but I want it to overlap that nicely right in here. Okay? Now I've got my forward and aft position roughly set. Now I'm also noticing from the front that I'm hitting the center foot on the left side. Now I haven't set my center foot yet, so it could just be that I need to twist it differently. Remember, we have all this loose. But I'm going to gauge it to the feed dogs, and it looks to me like it needs to twist that way a little bit. And I noticed earlier when I was looking at this machine that this set screw right here is not even tight. See that one there? And those two set screws, I'm going to loosen them. One, and that one's already loose. That controls this guard here, or this guide. And what I want to do is I want to use that guide to square up my feet to the feed dog. And I'm going to get it set and then hold it where I want it. Snug up one screw, make sure it looks good. It looks good. And then I'm going to come back and now, Eric, I'm going to have to turn this so I can tighten those, but I've got it where I want it right now. I'm going to unplug this machine too. Now, it's important that when you're tightening these that you don't let it twist on you while you tighten. It can. And you don't want to slip on these screw heads either. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good. So now we're looking better on that. And if we need to tweak that later, we can tweak it. Okay, so the guide is set. Now, guide set, our fore and aft position is roughly set. Next thing we want to do with the presser foot up is we want to set our maximum height. Remember, our foot's still loose. We want to set our maximum height for the foot. So when the foot is lifting, you can watch, okay? Watch this bracket back here. Notice, even though my foot's not going up and down, you can see this piece moving up and down. So at its highest position, you just find the highest position where that piece goes up to the top. See it? Spring is uncompressed. Spring is compressed. I'm at the top position. What I want to do is I want to set my outer foot here. Notice I have a top. Top's out right here in the slot of the guide that we were just working with. Okay? You can get pretty fancy about this if you want, and you can take a 3mm Allen wrench and you can slide it in there, and you can say, okay, I want 3 millimeters of gap there, and then you can take your Allen wrench out or get another one, and now I can lock this down. Now, before I lock one of these down, I want you to notice that I can twist this piece. Watch. See that? Okay, if I twist it hard to the right, I create a bind back here. If I twist it hard to the left, I create a bind in the front here. So you want to move it both ways and then find the middle ground. And then you want to just snug one of those. Okay? Now we've set our outer foot. Now we need to set our inner foot. So what we're going to do, notice how my inner foot's just a mess. It's all loose. So it's not controlling anything. So my outer foot's not even coming up right now. So what I have to do now is, this is trial and error. I've got to set my center foot low enough that it causes my outer foot to rise. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat a little bit. I know that my outer foot should be riding pretty much the same height above the inner foot as it goes below the inner foot. And I'm noticing that the outer foot is riding completely below the center foot all the way. So I know that center foot's got to come down, but I am also noticing I'm still not getting as much clearance as I would like, and my 3mm setting here may not quite be close enough. We might want to cut that down to maybe 1 millimeter, so I'm going to raise that a little bit more. Let's assume we want a 1mm gap here. It would have been better. I just have to have enough gap that I'm not creating a bind there. But I like to set my feet so I get good height to my feet so I can get my projects under them. Okay, so I'm finding the balance point there. Good. Now we got it. Now let's look at the front. Still, the outer foot is rotating further down from the center foot than it is up from the center foot, so I know I need to tap it down a little bit. So I'm going to square it up, and I'm just going to tap it down. Okay, now I've done enough of this that I know that I'm going to be pretty close here, and I'm going to snug this up, but then we're going to do it the way you might do it, so you can see the problem. Drop the foot. Okay, well good, I didn't do it very well. So look, I'm getting way too much pop to the center foot. I'm getting over 3 millimeters here, and I'm not getting 3 millimeters here. So what does that mean? That means in order to get more height under the walking foot, I need to move the presser foot down, because what you've got is when the presser foot's going down, once it hits something hard and pushes against it, however much it pushes determines how much this foot comes up. Okay? So we need to raise it a bit more, or we need to lower it a bit more. Loosen that. Okay. Now I may have gone too much, but we're going to check. I'm going to try and square it center and make sure that it's centered in the foot. Snug it down a little bit. Okay. Now I'll drop my foot. Okay, now we're getting about a millimeter rise to the center foot, and we're getting 3 millimeter rise. You can see I can pass my 3 millimeters under there to the outer foot. We are right on. Okay. That's what you want. There's what your motion should look like. And when we lift the foot, this is what your motion should look like from the front. You'll notice that if I'm looking at the bottom surface of the feet relative to the bottom surface of the inner foot, I'm getting roughly the same height around that bottom plane of the center foot. It's going up the same height as it is going down below it. So if we were to say the distance from here to here equals X, the distance from here to here should still become pretty close to X. Okay? So that's how I know they look right. Now, I noticed one other thing, and that is I don't like the motion of the foot. It's doing almost a pull like this as opposed to a more rectangular motion. And that's driven by the cam up here, which we did not talk about. So that cam should be set when this screw right here, make sure Eric can see that, when that screw is facing directly back, and Eric, let me look in there to see if it's directly back. Directly back, so it's sticking straight back now, okay? This unit here should be peeking out about half of its distance. And it looks pretty close, but it needs to go, the cam needs to come toward me just a bit. So I'm going to loosen this screw. Okay, now we need to come this way with it just a touch. Let me see what we've got now. Now I'm going to look at it, approximate it being way back. Still need to come a little bit further forward. There, we're looking pretty good. Now let's see what this motion looks like. Much better. We have a much more rectangular motion to the foot as opposed to that dipping down in the back hard. Okay, probably would have worked the other way, but this is going to be better, and we're fine-tuning. It'll feed better. Okay, so get that good and tight. And again, when that's straight back, I should have just a little bit of this piece peeking out in front of the front surface of the needle bar. Okay. Now, notice, going back to what we were looking at before, with everything that I've changed here, we got pretty good gap under the foot for feeding now. We can get some pretty hefty material. I can even get my finger in there and sew it if I wanted to. And I'm not topping out up here, but I'm close, which means I'm proving that I've got my maximum foot height. When I go back up to needle bar at top center, I've got my 2-degree angle back, and everything looks pretty good. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to drop the foot down, and I want to make sure that the feet are engaging the feed dogs. And notice I'm getting no clicking between the upper foot and the feed dogs. If I was, and now I'm going in reverse, and even there it's not bad. And forward, though, that's what we mostly care about. If I was getting some clicking, I might have to adjust the fore and aft position of the outer foot. Just keep in mind, the more you push the foot forward, the higher it actually lifts. The more you push it back, the lower it gets. So sometimes when you adjust the fore and aft position, again via this device back here, you end up having to also adjust the outer foot height a bit in order to compensate for that change that occurs by moving it. But this isn't clicking, so we're good. So you would adjust it back here. We were talking about the controlling the fore and aft movement of the outer foot. Now, the way you check that, though, remember I told you I want this outer toe roughly 1/8 of an inch in front of the center toe in the best position. But when you're in the maximum position, if you look back here between the 2 feet, I don't know if you can see where I've got my Allen wrench, at the back of the center foot and the front of the walking foot, there's a gap. And what we need to make sure is that there's no binding occurring there. If the outer foot is hitting the center foot at any point in the rotation, that's a problem. If the gap is too big, it's a problem, as we noted when we started this process. But now you have a point of reference to figure out how to set this. But, back to what we were saying, even if you have it that 1/8 inch, and if when you drop the foot you're getting a clicking sound because the teeth are not mating with one another, you may have to tweak the adjustment here and move it fore or aft a little bit. The key is the 1/8 inch isn't so critical. What is critical is you can't have a collision occurring between the 2 feet. And you've got to check that in both forward and reverse because the feed motion is different in forward and reverse. Notice in reverse on this machine I'm not getting my 1/8 inch at all. I'm getting maybe a 1/16 of an inch. Now all machines are different when it comes to that offset between the forward and the reverse travel. So those of us that do this all the time, we err on the side of which makes the most sense. If you're getting a bigger gap in reverse than you are in forward, and you're getting a clicking motion, you want to compensate for the clicking motion by moving the foot forward in this case as opposed to back, because we want to improve the reverse overlap as opposed to making it worse. But again, we've got it set. That's really all there is to setting the feed motion and the feet on an Ultrafeed sewing machine. And if you watch this video several times, I'm sure you'll get it. It is complicated, but it's not so complicated. It's just everything has to be in the right position. Then you get a smoothly operating machine. You don't get clicking noises at the feet, and that's pretty much all there is to it.
Before we leave you here, we want to remind you to tighten all the screws that you loosened.